That person who never says anything to anybody but quietly serves behind the scenes stood up and said, "We have to start leading and quit talking."
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and Missy's got a confession that she's going to make on the pod this week. And then later on in the show, we're going to sit down with Amy Butler and Darwin Weaks as they talk about their new book, Holy Disruption, a Manifesto for the Future of Faith Communities. It's a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am absolutely sick.
What?
I know. I am so sick.
Not sick of me.
No, well, that's another podcast. No, I just 15 minutes ago did something that I don't think I have ever done in my life, and I'm just sick about it. Like, I'm shaky.
Okay. This is the first I'm hearing
I
about
know,
this, so
because it literally just happened.
okay.
So I was running a couple of errands earlier, and one of those was to go to our GFM storage unit and pick up some little like swag items for some of our new advocates.
Right.
So, side note, plug to become a GFM advocate.
Yeah.
And so on my way there, I hit a squirrel.
Oh.
Oh.
No. There's nothing worse than
And
that.
I don't think I have been driving for 34-ish years.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever hit a squirrel before. And it was like he was going across the road and he was like at the median, right?
Mhm.
He was going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he panicked and ran back. And it was one of the things that where I didn't feel it and I wasn't sure if I'd hit him. And I looked back in my rearview mirror and it looked, the worst part is it looked like I had hit him, but not like run over him, which meant he was probably laying there suffering. And it just made me sick to my stomach. And so I went to storage. I got the stuff.
Oh no.
I know. And then I thought on the way back, I'm going to see if he's still there. And like, I don't know what I was going to look for signs of life. I don't know what I was going to do. I wouldn't have had the strength to go finish the job.
Yeah.
I don't know
Put
what
him
I
out
was,
of his
I
misery.
know. I don't know what I was looking for, but when
Yeah.
I came back, it was clear several cars had. Anyways, I'm shook. I feel terrible. And if you are a recent good faith advocate, just know that you bear some responsibility in this.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Anyway.
I wish I had good news for you. You are going to carry this for the rest of your life because the last squirrel I hit was over 20 years ago. I
And
was
you
in a
remember
car
it.
with one of our deacons at First Baptist Church of Bedford, Texas.
Uh-huh.
And Patty Pitcock actually was in the car with me.
I don't think you're supposed to give real names on the podcast, but you go on.
Well, Deacon Patty and I were going to make a visit, and I hit a squirrel, and I can still see it in the rearview mirror. It just
It's
broke
a
my heart. It's
horrible
horrible.
feeling.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, that's what just
Well, I am
happened
so
to me.
sorry.
But aside from that, I am back not sick physically.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Sorry I missed last week. I don't know what you told our listeners. This is terrible. I haven't even had a chance to listen to that yet.
Mhm.
But I was
I
so
told the audience you had the plague or something like that. I
okay,
can't
great.
remember.
Awesome. That's perfect. No, I was so sick.
Yeah.
Yes, some sort of stomach bug. It was not fun.
Yeah, you were curled up for a while.
Yeah, in fact, I had to cancel a trip over the weekend that I had very much been looking forward
Wah,
to.
wah, wah.
It was awful.
terrible.
I was very sad. So sad, in fact, that on Sunday morning when I woke up and was still kind of like, not great, but
Mhm.
but much better, but still feeling just tired or whatever. I decided I was in such a funk that the best thing I could do was to go online and listen to the sermon from the church down the street from our house.
Oh, no.
And for context,
No. I
for
know
context,
the church.
I know. For context, like, so I didn't get a chance to come on here and talk about Charlie Kirk and what happened, which was...
Callie joined us and did a great job.
Yes, I'm sure she did. But I haven't had my
No, you
moment
have
to
not.
talk about it.
You have not had your moment.
And so I'm going to take that privilege right now in this context, because Sunday morning, again, I'm in a funk and I'm like, what can help me stay in my funk? That's what it was. And so this church down the street from us is Mitch, they are a Bible-believing church, if you didn't know that.
Well, of course they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. And, they think quite differently than we do.
Yeah,
So
just
I
a
thought,
tad.
this will be fun. I'll just listen to it. And I
Now,
did.
For context, I was a pastor in this town for over a decade. So every now and again, I had to tussle with the pastor of this church.
Okay.
So, yeah, I know exactly
You know who I'm talking
you're
about.
talking about.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize now what he said. And before I do that, I just want to tell you, in case you wanted to know.
Right.
He had fully intended to continue preaching on his series that he had been preaching. In fact, Mitch, up until Saturday night when he went to bed, this was his plan.
Come on with it.
But Sunday morning, as he was in his office preparing,
Sunday morning, yes,
a word came to him.
A word.
So he preached about the events of the week.
Of course.
Of course. Let me just caveat by saying, what happened to Charlie Kirk was terrible. It was murder.
100%.
It was awful. I'm not making light of that. I'm just telling this story because
Right. No, I get it.
I'm going to totally regret this later. But anyways, so he prepares a different message for that Sunday. And will you allow me to be petty for a moment?
Do I really need you need permission to be petty? Go right ahead.
I just want to say that it's vigil, not visual.
Visual.
All right. I'm done with being petty, and now I'm just going to tell you. And part of this was because I don't have a lot of folks on my social media feed that were followers or like fans of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
My feed was filled with, what I just said, like this was wrong and this was tragic and shouldn't have happened. But people on my feed obviously weren't like fans of his.
Right.
Anyways, so I'm like, I just want to hear what another viewpoint is.
Yeah.
So he praised Kirk because he went to, and I'm going to quote here, the most hostile places. Any guess where those might be?
I have no idea.
College campuses.
So hostile.
God bless someone who is willing to put themselves in that place of risk of a college campus.
Yeah,
which I know the irony is there, but I mean, anyways, he said that conservatism is Bible believing. That's what it basically means. And that Kirk was killed because he was an effective conservative Christian. And in case you're wondering, this pastor holds that position because he has thought and prayed about it since he heard the news.
Of course he has.
So he wraps his sermon with a diatribe, that begins with, as you can imagine, are you willing to die for your faith? Which, but then he goes on to say, and if you don't come to church when it rains, and if you're not willing to give up that friendship, that basically he's calling into question your faith and your belief.
Jeez.
And I heard something at the end that I haven't heard in years that I just made note of, which was, and don't leave here today without doing business with God.
Oh my gosh.
So anyways, that's just what I did. I don't know why I did that, but I thought I just want to kind of see and I'm sure that general sermon was preached. He was basically making a case for Charlie Kirk being a martyr.
Sure.
And I don't know. I just wanted to hear, and it's just clear that we live in different realities.
Right.
And that's what's so frustrating, is that there's no consensus of what is truth or what is real. And we're just seeing that so blatantly right now. And so I know I don't want to go on and talk about this for a long time, because I know you guys have already talked about it last week, and lots of outlets are talking about it. But that was what I did on Sunday as I was recovering.
Did that make you feel better?
No, but that's not what I wanted. I was sad and I was upset that I had gotten sick and missed a trip that I was so looking
Oh,
forward
okay.
to. And so it perpetuated the funk. And so for that, I was happy. And what do you always say?
You're the happiest when you have something to complain about.
100%. So,
Oh.
anyways, with all that said, I've taken over the first several minutes of this, and I haven't even congratulated you on your big win this week.
I know. Big news came out of the state of Oklahoma this week as our firm, the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, who is representing me as well as other plaintiffs in numerous suits here in Oklahoma. But
Right.
this one in particular, I'm the lead plaintiff. It's Randall versus Walters, who is the Oklahoma superintendent for public education. Everybody probably knows Ryan Walters, but this latest case has to do with the mandate that he has imposed upon teachers to teach certain elements within social studies curriculum that are just blatantly false, blatantly lies, a manipulation of history, also the infusion of biblical text as social studies lessons. And we, along with my other plaintiffs, sued them. Americans United filed an injunction to stop the implementation of this before it goes to trial. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the injunction. So as of now, those curriculum standards cannot be taught in public education in Oklahoma. So yes, it was a big win for us.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I
And-
was really excited.
In a weird, coincidence of timing, we happened to be, when we got the news, we happened to be in Dallas
Right.
at an event, at a conference promoting public education, which was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've said this before. I say it again. It was reinforced this week in Dallas at the summit that was put on by Interfaith Alliance. So it was really neat to see a lot of different clerics there, people from different faith traditions talking about the importance of public education. Because as we have talked about on this show before, that the public schools are really the center of community activity because everybody is welcome there. Everybody is educated. It doesn't matter your background, your economic status,
Right.
doesn't matter your religious background. You come into this environment and you are educated and there's a community that exists. And so it was really neat to hear all the different perspectives and all the support for public education. And one of the things that really stood out to me, and I know you got some quotes that you want to share from the summit, but the one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that how important it is for us to be vocal in our support of public educators, because it can be so isolating today, especially in states like Texas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, states that are defunding public education, vilifying educators, it seems like at every turn. And so to know that there is a large, large populace out there in your state that supports teachers, that supports administrators, that supports public education, and that is rooting you on, that needs to be vocalized often as much as possible.
Yes, that was one of the main points all of the speakers made, was it starts very locally. And
Absolutely.
that's one of the places you start, is in your local school and in your local school board. So one of the speakers put up a quote from a book that, and I'm really sad. Maybe others have heard this before. I had not, and I want to pass it along in case any of our listeners have not heard it. But man, it just hit me. This is from, and forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Haim Gano says, "Dear teacher, I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no person should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers, children poisoned by educated physicians, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot and killed by high school and college graduates. So I am suspicious of education. My request is, help your students become human. Your effort must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, or educated Eichmanns. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are only important if they serve to make our children more human." Again, that's from Haim Gano. He was an author, a child psychologist, and psychotherapist and parent educator. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I thought, This is what our public school teachers are doing, have been doing all along, and are not getting the credit for it.
Right.
And that's what's so frustrating. Public education is one of the great gifts that our country has given all of its people.
Mm-hmm.
And we have got to fight to protect it. And we've got to fight to protect a teacher's right to educate all children.
Absolutely.
And a teacher's right to do that in a holistic way and not from one specific perspective.
Right.
We need to create good humans as well as teach. And that is a very difficult job. They show up every day for our kids.
Absolutely, they do.
And that needs to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. I often say, and I've probably said it on this pod before, that religion at its best, doesn't matter what religion you follow, religion at its best teaches you to become the best human you possibly can be. The same can be said about education. Education is about shaping minds and hearts and preparing students to be better humans as they grow into adulthood. And that's what teachers do. They are creating amazing human beings every day. They are shaping them. They are loving them. They are sharing their lives with these children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important. And I can look back upon my life and I can almost name every teacher I had growing up and the influence that they had upon me in my life. I am who I am because of those public educators.
And guess what? They didn't have to use the Bible as curriculum.
They did not.
In order to do that. They didn't have to twist Bible stories or infuse those because, you hear, I've heard it said, let me go a little Jesus. You have heard it said, preach the gospel.
Right.
And when necessary, use words.
Yeah, it's a Francis Assisi quote.
Yes. Here's the thing. Those teachers did exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
You're a testament to that. I'm a testament to that. Our kids are.
Yeah.
Those teachers are pouring themselves into those kids every day.
Absolutely.
Whatever their faith tradition is or whatever their non-faith tradition, that's what they do.
100%. So it was a great time in Dallas. Loved all of the speakers that were there. We've got some interviews going to be thrown up on our YouTube channel, goodfaithmedia.org this week. So check those out. But yeah, it was a great time. And just remember, if you got an educator in your family or your kids are at school, send them a note, bake them some cookies, do something for them because they are bringing it every day.
Start local, start in your immediate community.
Absolutely.
Okay, so changing gears. This week we have a great pair of guests.
Oh my gosh. It's always a fun week when we have Amy Butler to the pod, but she brought a guest with her. And Darwin Weaks is a co-author with Amy, and they've got a book out titled Holy Disruption, a Manifesto for the Future of Faith Communities.
Yes, and I just want to note, I'm pretty sure Amy and I both made it through this whole episode and neither of us had to be bleeped. And let me tell you, that's an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment for you and Amy. I know you both. So yeah, we'll be right back with Amy Butler and Darwin Weaks to talk about their new book, Holy Disruption. As a former college baseball player, I know firsthand the challenges athletes face. That's why we're proud to support Christian Athlete Circles, a ministry that is creating spaces and resources to accompany athletes on their faith journey, wherever they are. To learn more about Christian Athlete Circles, go to christianathletecircles.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special two-guest panel with us. Reverend Dr. Amy Butler is a writer, preacher, teacher, pastor, and public theologian. She has been a pastor of churches in Washington, D.C. and New York City. Most Sundays, you'll find Pastor Amy in the pulpit at Community Church in Honolulu, where she has served as pastor since 2023. She also is the founder of Invested Faith, a nonprofit fund created to allow churches, institutions, and individuals to reimagine how faith communities can heal the world, even beyond their traditional institutions institutional expressions. Reverend Dr. Darwin Weaks loves to see the transformation that occurs at the intersection of church and community. She pastored churches in Lubbock, Texas, Miami, Texas, and Rowlett, Texas, and in Raytown, Missouri. She is now the co-pastor of Connection Christian Church in Odessa, Texas, with her husband, Reverend Dr. Joe Weeks. The pastors have a new book out titled Holy Disruption, a Manifesto for the Future of Faith Communities. Reverend Butler, Reverend Weeks, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
So happy to be here.
Fun to be here.
Excellent.
All right, Don, we're gonna start with you, and you and I can have a little chat for a moment. I've been friends with Amy for a minute.
Oh, Amy, you do want Amy out of the picture
we
here?
need to cut off her mic.
Okay.
One, there is a support group. We meet on Tuesdays. We'd love to have you.
Yes. I will be there on Tuesday.
Yes. So I know Amy well enough to know that when you get a text or a message from her saying, hey, can we do XYZ? There's no need to like sit and think, is this a good decision? There's no point. You just need to say, do I need an attorney? Is there a body to bury? You're not getting out of whatever it is she's calling you to do. So this is how I'm imagining this book came to be. Is that true? Tell me how you got wrapped into this project.
That is 93% accurate, I would say.
I love the specificity of that.
Yes. So Amy was 2 years ahead of me in our undergrad at Baylor. We never met. Our paths were parallel to each other in similar worlds. We knew similar people, but we never met until she came to Midland, Texas, of all places. Not a place a lot of people have been. And she was there for Invested Faith, and I met her briefly at a reading of her first book. In fact, she met two folks that needed a church home, hadn't even met me before, but said, you should go to her church. And those two women also who could not say no to the
Right.
Reverend Dr. Amy Butler came to my church and are still there 3 years later.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
But we didn't really get to talk. It was a big group. The next time Amy came through our area, we intentionally set up a clergy women's coffee. And there were only a few of us that came. And that's when we really got to talk. And she started to tell me these stories of these Invested Faith fellows. And I had written a book about our church's transformation. And that had really catalyzed me to be about saying out loud the quiet parts about church decline and the opportunity available to us in this moment. If we will just imagine more.
Mm-hmm.
With these stories that Amy was saying, we just brought on some new fellows. Here's what they're about. I said, you got to tell these stories. This needs to be a book. It needs to go far and wide. And she said, will you write it with me? And
You learned your lesson real good that day.
And I had another project, but I said, well, I'll think about it, but was prayerful, thoughtful about it, and just immediately felt this sense of calling to be a part of Invested Faith and this reimagining what is possible rather than just either keeping our heads in the sand or keeping our heads down in despair, but seeing what's next. And that's what Amy's all about. And it's been so fun to meet some of these fellows and be on the journey with her.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So Amy, let's talk about Holy Disruption. First of all, to both of you, congratulations on the publication of the book. Missy and I went through it quickly, loved it. The stories are incredible. The analysis that you both provide is really, really in-depth and top-notch. So let's begin with this idea of death, which is a really uplifting topic to begin with, Amy. But in some of those first chapters, there was this sentence, and I want to read this sentence to you. Ignoring the necessary death that precedes resurrection has been a sin of the modern church. So in this process of holy disruption, you begin with death and the need for death. So talk a little bit about why you think that there needs to be a necessary death for the church these days.
Well, I want to go back to this conversation that Don and I had with coffee.
I have a feeling you would.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think that the perception was Invested Faith is sort of cannibalizing churches that are dying. And I felt like our conversation was so like impactful because it it combined like the possibility of new life with like talking about death. And that the fact that you, Dawn, met me there was so liberating to me. Um, yes, we have to talk about death. And I was so
Well,
grateful
let me
that
interject real quick because I mean, I do want you start with death, but you quickly pivot to what you call resurrection imagination. So even though you start with death, you really it lends into this hopefulness that there is a future. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. I think Dawn needs to summarize a story that she tells at the very beginning of the book, which is so powerful
Yeah.
and sort of, I think, explains the theology that we tried to write through the entire book.
Hmm.
Dawn, would you like summarize that story?
Ah, yes. Okay, I have my tissues nearby. Listeners, beware. When our congregation made the decision to sell the buildings that we'd been in since the 1940s, and move into a renovated dialysis medical office building and make ourselves a community center for nonprofits, as well as our congregation going into its 115th year in the
Hmm.
community. Our last Sunday was in the old building, and everything had already been cleared away, and we just were using folding chairs. It was the last Sunday of the year, so it was the second Sunday of Christmastide, and
Right.
so we were singing Go Tell It on the Mountain and those kinds of hymns, and the offering came, and everything was going pretty well in the service. It was kind of uplifting and sweet. And the next thing we would do was put everything in the little U-Haul trailer and get ready to worship the next Sunday in the cafeteria of an elementary school after 114 years in this location. Um, and the offering came, and as I'm seeing the big old heavy brass plates that we grew up with passed down the aisle, I started to hear a weird sound. And it wasn't just like change in the offering, it was heavier than that. It was a clunking sound. And I could not figure out what that sound was. And as the child brought the offering, one of the two children we had in our congregation brought the offering forward and set it on the altar, I looked in and it was keys.
Hmm.
People had fished their keys out of their purses and pockets who had keys to the church. And you know how it is. Nobody knows who has keys to the church. There was no way to find all that out, but they had, of their own volition, turned over their keys as an offering to God and said goodbye to what was
Yeah.
in a final way. We're never going to get to come in this building again. It will
Wow.
not be ours. That chapter of the story is over.
Yeah.
And I went and got my keys and fished them out of my purse and put them in the plate as a way of saying, we're not in control, and let's go, Holy Spirit.
That's awesome.
So I want to know how they all brought their tables that they had, quote, borrowed from the fellowship hall over the years as well, that were then definitely sitting in their garages.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And folding chairs.
Right.
Right. And the book, is not about I tell that story briefly. It's not really about our congregation's death and resurrection, but about the possibility of it for all congregations. And it looks different in every place and every context. And what Amy's Invested Faith Fellows are doing is there are field research.
Right.
There are 10 years ahead of us, 20 years ahead of us out there saying what works. They're the explorers,
Right.
kind of like astronauts on the moon, giving reports back about what's there and what we can expect next.
Yeah, I had a note here to ask you about that because I loved the way you told it and the way you expressed that you were honoring a moment and honoring what had been and also giving hope for what's to come. Kind of going back to Amy, what you said, like there's a necessary death before an imagination and resurrection and kind of what's to come. That was a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it with our listeners.
Yeah. So Don, digging a little deeper, because it's a beautiful story. And I said a moment ago, we kind of begin with death because you can't have resurrection without death. Is there a tipping point, a moment that you can point to where the church said, you know what, it's time to let this go and move on?
Yes. The longer story is told in my first book, Breakthrough,
Hmm.
Trusting God for Big Change in Your Church. The short version of that exact moment is we'd been talking about this for years. And we had come as co-pastors to kind of help them go ahead and do the thing.
Mhm.
Um, the decline was evident, the financial decline was evident, the state of the building success was evident. There was just, it was all over, but the church was still just talking about it until one quiet man who had been the property chair for decades, and only that person knows how bad it is.
Right.
Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Yes.
That person who never says anything to anybody but quietly serves behind the scenes stood up and said, we have to start leading and quit talking. What
Mm,
are we going to do next?
yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And that broke the dam, and people started saying, okay, well, what could we do? And let's try this. And it was really a very powerful moment.
Yeah, I bet. So Missy's going to be asking some questions here in just a second. And those are the fun questions about the fellows that you mentioned, Don, because they are really doing some remarkable work all across the world. We've had a front row seat in some of those circumstances and just really been blown away and inspired by all of their work. But Amy, I want to return to you. You have pastored some of the most iconic churches in the country in Washington, D.C. and New York City. You and I sat down at a restaurant years and years ago to talk about this idea you had. And you rattled off these statistics about all the assets that the church has globally. You talked about how many churches are closing their doors versus how many are opening doors through church starts. And I was hooked from day one. I thought this is the future of the church and the future of how you live out faith. But there has been a reluctancy by the church to come to that realization. The church seems to hold on with a white knuckle grip to their traditions and to their institutions. Can you talk, before we talk about the fellows, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and the hesitancy by the church at large to let go of these institutions, and maybe some advice to church leaders to help churches begin this process?
Mitch, you've always been such a great listener and friend and always listening to my weirdo ideas. Um, but I was, having been the pastor of historical churches, I was watching the decline and seeing the developers coming in, taking advantage of churches. And I thought, I don't know what the future of the church is. You don't. None of us do.
Hmm.
What we do know is that God has not left us and that God's work in the world continues. I have been surprised, and this has to do with my naivete, that denominations haven't rushed toward this idea because churches are closing at a huge alarming rate. I mean, UCC told me a few weeks ago they have one church closing a week. And I think it's our job as religious leaders to provide legacy and the message that God has not left us and God's work is still going on and we can still be part of it.
Hmm.
And I just want to say, like, several people have asked us, why did you choose such incendiary language to name your book? You know, Holy
A
Disruption, a
manifesto. I mean, that was just
manifesto for
very
the future of
provocative.
faith community. Yeah. And, I don't know, Don might wanna comment on this, but, that came to us really easily because I think we wanna say this is a moment where radical action is our calling.
Hmm. Absolutely. Don, follow up?
Yes. We didn't want anybody to be able to sleep on this, wake up. I just came back from our Disciples of Christ annual conference where nothing was said about the decline of the church, and it's
Hmm.
considered sort of pessimistic to
Right.
talk about it. Well, my goodness, the truth is not pessimistic. When we tell the truth, then we can get to the hope part,
Yeah.
And so, honestly, it came out of some frustration
Right.
and also from the sense that Amy and I have paid our dues long enough in the church, capital C, that we can sort of say it like it needs to be said and like we felt compelled to say it. And our careers are not on the line for that. Whereas denominational judicatory people, their careers are on the line. And so we've got some pretty pointed things to say about how denominational structures are ignoring this moment or just kind of dinking around about, well, let's try this tweak here or offer this program there, when writing is on the wall, to use a biblical metaphor. And we need vision and we need courage. And I love the John O'Donohue poem that we quote in this book. We need to learn to find ease in taking risks.
Yeah. And what I like about this approach is that, while you're talking about the death that leads to resurrection, you're doing it in a very proactive way, because in the same breath you're talking about death and resurrection, you're also talking about throwing seeds everywhere. And I love that metaphor. I love that analogy that you both use in the book. So talk about kind of this seed theology that comes from this process.
That's Amy's story from being in London and meeting, this fellow who had started this seedbed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that both Dawn and I pastor churches.
Right.
Love the church.
Sure.
It's not like the church or invested faith. It's like, how can we join in the work of God in the world in every way possible? And a big part of the book is that seed theology, as
Yeah.
you mentioned. Jesus talked about throwing seeds everywhere, all over the Gospels. So many seed stories. And there's a story I tell in the book about how I started to pay attention to those repeated stories about throwing seeds. And I started to wonder, maybe it's not our job to worry about what happens after we throw the seeds. Maybe it's our job to throw the seeds,
Yeah.
not just sit on them and hold them, but to trust God enough that we believe God is going to do something amazing.
Right.
So let's now turn and talk about some of these amazing fellows and
Absolutely.
examples of what also Dawn, your church is doing in the world. I think a word that keeps coming to mind for me the last couple of years that I see over and over is just imagination. And I think that's just something that both of you have encapsulated so well, is how can we imagine something that's bigger and more fruitful and bountiful than we could ever even conceive. And so you weave in stories about these fellows and how they are disrupting and dismantling systems of unjust systems and lack of resources in their communities. So Amy, I want to give you a chance to tell a few stories of your fellows. And then Dawn, I'd love for you to share with us what your church is doing.
I'll kind of turn the tables on this and say that Dawn should tell you some of the stories that impacted her the most, because I found writing this book with Dawn to be so amazing. It was such a wonderful experience. First of all, she's much more responsible and timely than I am. But
Not true.
after hearing the stories of the fellows I was telling her, she took on the job of interviewing all of our fellows. And it was lovely to have her eyes on their work. And so I wonder, Dawn, if you would say the stories of some of the fellows that were impactful for you.
I think for Amy, it was kind of like, when you appreciate something and then you get to show it to someone else and they appreciate it. And then it makes your appreciation grow that much more because you're seeing the wonder through your eyes. I mean, I've been in ministry 30 years. You get a little weary sometimes. And I really found that hearing these stories rejuvenated me for my pastoring for more years to come. One of my favorites, is Dustin Mailman, who is at this United Methodist Church in North Carolina. They called him to be the associate so that they would get children and youth. Anybody ever been hired for that?
Yeah.
Like all of us, right?
Not anymore.
And he found this tiny little congregation that had a lot of heart, but not very many people at all. And he just started getting to know the neighbors. And what he found was a neighborhood that had a recidivism problem. People would be incarcerated. They would return as returning citizens, but not be able to get a job. Therefore, they had despair in their lives and would return back to prison. And it was just an economic downturn for that area because of this problem. And so he asked the congregation, could I use one of our unused Sunday school room? I'd like to ask anyone listening to the podcast, do you have any unused rooms in your building?
I've got unused rooms in my house.
Yes. So could they use one of the rooms to roast coffee? And there's reasons that he was interested in roasting coffee and learning how. He'd never done it before. So he starts roasting coffee with some of these neighbors.
Mhm.
And now they house 19 returning citizens who have a job to go to and who do something meaningful and make deep time coffee. On top of that, they were in the area where the floods happened in North Carolina recently, and he was able to be a blessing to the community, offering their gorgeous coffee to the community through that time. And they have grown the church. Not that it's always about that, but it turns out that worked for them because now the church has a meaningful mission in the community. And guess what? People are attracted to being a part of meaningful things. That's just one example.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about what your church has done. I know you mentioned that everybody put the keys in the offering
Yeah.
plate and you walked away from a building, which is very, very difficult to do. So tell us kind of what that has meant for you and your congregation.
Sometimes churches need to stay where they are and rejuvenate. Sometimes churches need to move, and we relocated, renamed, repurposed. Sometimes churches need to close. The energy for that is not there, and they need to figure out how to be wildly imaginative with what they have, giving it to places like Invested Faith. But for us, it was a relocation, a renaming, a repurposing. It genuinely took about 7 years for that whole process to happen. And now we're living out of the thriving, flourishing fruit of that as we've grown a lot in number and financial capacity, but also mostly in deeply impacting our community in ways that won't go away.
Wow. Love that. Okay, so at the end of the book, you both write these words. You move from holy disruptors to hopeful disruptors. I love that language and that play on words. But you write specifically, and let me read this to you. As people of faith, we can put our hands and hearts and resources towards the work of toward repair. And you use a Hebrew phrase there. In this version of eschatological living, we do not deny the evil, destruction, and violence of this world, but we choose instead to move with courage towards a future of repair, of justice, of wholeness for our neighbors in keeping with God's intention for creation. So I want to ask both of you, looking at the current state of the church, looking at some of these bright spots, especially among the entrepreneurs that you point out in the book, what do you see? I know that it's not going to be an exact science, but how do you see the future of the church as it begins to play out and evolve? So, Amy, let's begin with you, and then we'll go with Don.
Well, I have to say that writing this part of the book was my favorite. What we tried to do there was articulate a theology of the end.
Mhm.
There were several reasons we did this. One is we want to help our colleagues, have the words and the ideas to be able to invite their people into a hopeful eschatology. Um, Secondly, we really think like we can tell you all these stories, but there's a theological underpinning that has to be solid. And the question really is, do you believe that God is still working in the world? And are you willing to take chances just to see what God is up to? And we ran several test groups on this book, and that was always the place where people were like, aha, like it's not just telling the stories of Dustin Mailman and other
Right.
um, interesting people. it's a whole way of thinking about how God is working in the world. And my hope anyway was that it would give words and ideas to other leaders who are facing some of these questions, and encourage them to invite their people into a hopeful eschatology.
And Don, how do you see the future?
I think we can't know, and that's exciting. Ephesians 3 tells us that God will do far beyond all we can ask or imagine. So I would love to see more people leaning into that imagine part, as Missy said earlier,
Mhm.
and allowing kind of our imaginations to run away with us. And what I think that will mean is more of a rift between those who are staying with what they know and those who are going with what they imagine. And that's hard. And we'll have to be really loving and respectful across that rift. Yet, once you're imagining, it's like contagious and it can't stop.
Right.
And you begin connecting with people who were also the imaginers out there. And you still have to, crunch the budget numbers and do the administration, and institution is not evil, but it cannot be limited. Um, with our imaginations stuck because of institution.
Yeah.
So we've got to just keep leaning into that imagination. And what we know is the church is thriving in places where people are impoverished. It's going in Latin America and in Asia. And so the more we use imagination and align ourselves with those who are on the edges and the margins and the least of these, the more we look like Jesus, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the more we'll see the future God intends for the church.
I just wanted to add, yes, yes, yes. And, it's both and.
Yeah.
It's like imagining new things for the church and honoring the institution, and then being able to talk about death and resurrection. And invested faith is an opportunity for churches who are closing or at the completion of their lives to make sure that their legacy lives on. And Dawn is so right. Our fellows come from the margins.
Right.
There are people who are scrappy, who have to learn how to survive, and they're coming up with some of the most amazing ways to be and live gospel in the world. And this is just an invitation for the church to acknowledge death and then see life and move in that direction.
Yeah. Before her passing, Phyllis Tickle talked about the 500-year cycle of the church and the rummage sale that needs to take place. And when I read about what you're doing in the book, both in your congregations as well as through these social entrepreneurs, I'm reminded of Phyllis Tickle's words of this rummage sale, but it's also not just a rummage sale. It's an opportunity to imagine a different future. And she did a great job of laying that out. And you're giving us a path forward. And I appreciate all the things that you're doing, not only in your congregations in Texas and in Hawaii, but also around the world through these fellows. And before I turn it over to Missy for our final question, I do want to say this, that your message is spreading and is beginning to be replicated. And let me give you an example of that. We contacted Amy a couple of months ago. We were fortunate enough to be up in St. Louis, and she introduced us to one of the fellows who took this abandoned shopping center. And Amy, forgive me, what was the fellow's?
Beverly Jenkins.
Yes, and it
Remember
was doing this
correctly.
great job of creating this. This child development center, as well as restaurants. There's a bank that's in there now, a job development center. I mean, just really doing some incredible things in this in that part of St. Louis. Well, we retold that story to one of our relatives here in Oklahoma City, and they got so excited about it that they wanted to know more about what was going on in St. Louis to see if we could replicate that here in Oklahoma City. So that's what, you talk about planting, throwing these seeds and they get planted in water, and well, you never know what's going to grow out of those seeds. And we're seeing that hopefully here in Oklahoma City as well. So your inspiration and dream and work, both of you, is coming to fruition. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your time with us this week. The book is titled Holy Disruption, a Manifesto for the Future of Faith Communities. Amy and Don, you're welcome back anytime to Good Faith Weekly. We really appreciate talking to both of you. But before we let you go, we've got one last question for both of you, and Missy has the honor of asking it.
So, Amy and Don, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell? Amy, we'll let you go first.
So here's my more to tell. This is a 6-week study that you can use in your church, and it will spur the conversations that you need to start having about death and resurrection. And I think this isn't unique, but what I would say there's more to tell is death is not the end.
Yeah.
Death is not the end. There's new life around the corner. We just need to be brave enough to go find it.
Love that. And Don?
Yes, I think more to tell in the Holy Disruption story is the ecumenical way that this book is reaching. We are no longer able to stay in our silos. God is using our sort of lack of resources and needs to connect us with people whose stories enrich ours. And it's been fun to see this is reaching all kinds of places. And there's more to tell that Amy and I, either one of us are willing to meet with your church or small group. If you are studying this book, let us know and we can hop on a Zoom with you and hopefully be a little leaven for the loaf and help things rise in your conversation with God's help.
Absolutely. And in the show notes, we'll put a link to purchase the book, as well as a link to Invested Faith and all that both of these incredible ministers are doing in their churches and across the world. So again, thank you both for joining us at Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you so much for your ministry.
With all these people I love is so wonderful to me. So thank you, Mitch and Missy and Don.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we want to thank you for listening this week, and we will be back next week with another guest. And until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.